Hi Melissa, I first have to start off apologizing. This is taking me a little bit longer to get up than I had intended. You know how it is with best intentions, they don't always go like you expect. Now, to selectively bring down the brown tones without changing the colors of the flowers or the pills or any of the blues here in the handle, first thing we want to do is do select and then color range. Now the options, if you are not using CS6, are a little bit different. Basically this localized color thing here is different. What you need to know here is the fuzziness factor. Now what this is going to do is change how much is selected. And so we're going to select a little brown rather, and you can see just by clicking right on that, all of this is immediately selected. Now you can see if you bring up the fuzzy factor, more is selected. If you bring it down, less is. What you want to do is find a range that selects most of what you want but not all of what you want. So I think this is a pretty good area to start with. The next thing to use is the little plus eyedropper tool, and you can either click here in the image to click on areas that haven't been selected, or you can click on the corresponding part in the photo. So you can see either works just fine. For the most part, it's easier to click here in the black part. Excuse me. Now if you go too far, then you can always use the minus tool and bring some of these back. So specifically we don't want any colors here in the flowers, so we'll bring those back. Now I think this is a pretty good spot for us. Again, you can work with the fuzziness tool a little bit more if you need to, but I think we'll call that good. Now whenever you have a selection, when you create something that has a layer mask, or if you create a new layer mask, it's going to automatically apply that. So anyways, if you apply it just to the basic pixels, and you can see exactly where it's covered, but of course that's not what we want to do, so I'm going to do a Control Z to undo that. And for some reason that's not working, so I'm going to click back here in the history. Now what we want to do is selectively desaturate, so we're going to make a black and white adjustment layer. You can also do the same thing using either the vibrance tool, or rather a vibrance adjustment layer, or an HSL layer, and desaturate from there. I like the black and white because it allows you to modify these a little bit. And I'm going to go somewhere in there. Now what you can see here is that I have some areas that didn't select very well, and I'd like to bring back some color here in the book, probably get rid of some color back here and here. But first of all, I'm thinking this is a little bit too desaturated for the overall look, so we're going to change the opacity and bring this back just a little bit. So now if you click the little eyeball to see on and off, you can see how the flowers don't really change, but the brown tones are way down. Now this layer mask here is really only a start. Going with the select color range is never going to give you a perfect mask. So the next thing you do, once you have your overall effect more or less where you want it, make sure that your layer mask is selected, and you can tell because it's got little brackets around it. And then we're going to paint with either a black or a white brush. Now a white brush is going to make it so that more of the effect is showing, black brush is going to hide it. So what we're going to do here, we're going to start with a white brush. We're going to go with a relatively low opacity and flow, and we're going to say somewhere in the 20-ish range. Now the reason that you do this is it makes it much more feathered, and it means that you can be more sloppy in your painting, which is going to make it quicker. So here we're going to go and we're going to paint in the areas that didn't get very much of the original selection and still have a little too much orange. And by using a low opacity, low flow, that means that we need to do multiple brush strokes in order to get the full effect. Now I don't really mind having a little bit of the orange here and there. Of course this isn't my photograph, so you need to make these creative decisions yourself. Now I want to bring back some color here in the book, so we're going to change it. Instead of a white brush, we're going to go to a black brush, and we're going to paint in some of that effect back in here. And just for the sake of being quick and easy, I'm going to bring the opacity up, and the flow rather up just a little bit more so that it comes in a little quicker. Now, assuming that I get this more or less like you wanted it, and I'll upload this image here so that you can see what it looks like yourself. I'm going to bring this down a little too. The next thing that you talked about was bringing down the values of the tablecloth. Now, of course, you can do the same sort of thing, making a selection. You can use a layer mask, but you already have a pretty decent selection here. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this by holding down the Control button, or Command if you're on a PC, on a Mac rather, and then click. And you can see this by holding down the Control. It gives you the little icon that shows you the little marching ants. That's how you know that you're making a selection. Now, because we don't want all of this selected, the thing I want to show to you now is how to adjust your selection by using a quick mask. Now, if you click on this button, you can see how it all turns to red. And basically, when you have the red, that means it's going to be included. It's going to look just like this here. Having the white, having no red is going to show you the areas that your effect is going to be applied. Now, we don't want any darkening applied to the flowers, so that's all okay. We don't want any darkening effect to this back wall. So what we want to do is actually start painting in this back wall and making that darker too, so that we don't get any of the effect on the wall. And again, I'm going real quick and dirty here. You can spend a lot more time with this, and hopefully you will spend more time when you're making these kind of edits. And we're going to darken this up here a little bit too. Now you can see if you're following along, the little red is fairly well behind because my processor's lagging a bit due to the effect of the recording. We're going to do a little bit more in here in the basket. And once this is more or less like you want it to look, and maybe a little more here in the bottle, in the book, then you go ahead and you click back on the quick layer mask, or quick mask, and now we have the same sort of effect. We're going to add in, you could use levels, you could use curves, brightness and contrast. I like curves, is my favorite. We're going to bring this down. And again, we can go pretty far because we're going to go back and we're going to adjust the opacity to try to dial it in just exactly where we want it. And what you might find then is that it made the knife too dark, so we'd click here on the layer mask and we'd want to hide that, so we'd paint with black. And by going back and forth this way, you can pretty easily change just the tonal values that you're interested in. So take a look at the image, and again, this is kind of a sloppy look because I was just doing it more to show you rather than make it look final. Take a look at what I did after watching the video and let me know if you have any questions. Learning how to use these kind of techniques with making the color selections and making very detailed layer masks, and I'll show you what these look like by holding down the Alt key. This is going to really come in handy for you in really all of the editing that you do. The same basic idea applies whether you are making a really detailed layer mask like this, or you're making very specific, increase or decrease in exposure or contrast and locally. So anyways, let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing your images soon.